This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. My name is Adam. I am your host. I do hope that everyone had a chance to view my last couple episodes. Have been really powerful. I featured Trishana. She is the 2024 International Model of the Year. And then last week we had Austin Glazer, who was amazing. And it's funny because me and Austin, in the beginning of that episode, we really shared about how we didn't get along when we first met. And then how our relationship grew, and then his individual journey was super powerful. So I do encourage you all to definitely check out those last episodes and every single other one before that, obviously. And don't hesitate to leave a review. Your support means so much to me. And as much as it means in kind texts and phone calls, the reviews would really go a long way for me. Today, I'm super grateful to have Brian Howie here. So just to give you a little background on how I met Brian, Brian, a lot of the things that he said early on were the things that inspired me to launch this podcast. So I was at a Greenwich Chamber of Commerce event, and, it was this new company called Podfather, and, I was going to the chamber events, but when I saw this hit my email, I remember reaching out to the chamber head and being like, listen, I definitely want to go to this event. When is it? And I showed up. And one of the things that Brian shared was just how, everyone has a power in their voice. And, one of the things that I had always been doing was watching Instagram and seeing people's podcast clips. And the one thing that he was stressing was listen, man, people consume podcasts on audio. They're in the gym, they're in their car. And that really changed my perspective when it came to wow, this could be a really powerful medium for me to reach a lot of people, for me to share hope and vulnerability so the journey began. And I think I came in the next day. And we just began to move forward. So without further ado, Brian, thank you so much.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I remember that day. I remember seeing it sort of click in your head. When I talk about podcasting, obviously video has its place in it, but a voice in the head is a very powerful thing. And most people are going to consume this way. And hopefully, something will resonate, something is relatable, something that can be shared. And, there's a real sense of community that you're building through this show. I'm super proud of you.
I appreciate that, dude. One of the things that really was I looked at that wall of all the different podcasts and I was like, why am I not up there?
Yeah.
And I was like, if these guys can do it, listen, everyone has their niche. And it was funny because I was like, these guys are talking about different types of wrenches or something, that's their passion, that's their thing. And they created a platform from that. I was like, I certainly can do that too. So that just having that visual aid there too, but also just, the environment that you made and just the way you presented it.
Yeah. I mean, we want a fun, safe, creative, encouraging place for people to find their voice, share their message, grow their audience. And that can manifest itself in 100 different ways. We believe that a great podcast is found at the intersection of passion and curiosity. So we are always trying to identify what are people passionate about as podcasters, meaning what would they be talking about every single day, even if they weren't recording a podcast? And what are they curious about, meaning what are they willing to go on a journey to discovery? I always say my own podcast that I've been doing about over 10 years, my job is to raise the questions, not necessarily provide the answers. But through the act of raising questions, you're going to find a whole lot of answers. And this is a lot of what you've been doing here is raising questions to people who probably didn't even have that answer before you asked the question. And I think that's a real talent and a skill that you have.
I appreciate that, man. And passion and curiosity. The one thing I'm very passionate about is people. I love hearing people's different stories. And the curiosity is me walking up to people, sometimes who I just met off the, first time, and being like, listen, I invite you to come on and share your story, and I want to know, what led you to the point that you're on in your life, which is a nice segue.
Yeah.
into why you're here.
I'm here because I heard you were selling purpose. This is where I find this is where I pick up my purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my circuitous journey to becoming who they call the Podfather. Yeah, it's a long story. Where do you want to start?
Well, I'd love to start at the beginning. I know you are from Bedford.
Yeah.
And I just want to like talk about that those early days, and then we can kind of go from there.
All right, we're gonna go vulnerable here. I'm gonna be real honest about my upbringing and whatever. So I grew up 15 miles up the road here. Affluent community. Father was a lifelong IBMer. He worked at the headquarters over here in Armonk, and this is during the heyday of IBM when it was a big company, big computers. And he went to work every day with a dark suit on, a white shirt, and he came home unhappy.
My dad, too.
I perceived him to be unhappy. He was very corporate. He was taking care of his family. He was making a good living. But there was not a lot of laughter coming out of him or in my house. And my mother was somebody who said, those things aren't important because she grew up without money, but in a house that had a lot of those things. My grandparents had those things, but they did not have money, so she was raised poor, but happy, I think, but not for her. So her and my father would really downplay anything creative, and I always said, I don't want that. I don't want that. I would sit in my room, I would write short stories, I would talk into a microphone, I would do all kinds of things. And my parents were against that the whole time. They thought that was irresponsible. When I was a very young kid here, I tested at a very high, I'm not saying this to brag, I'm saying this to give some perspective. One of the highest IQ scores for a 10-year-old in New York State. From that moment, my parents were like, anything you do in life that is less than curing cancer or landing on Mars is a waste of this intelligence. And I thought intelligence can manifest itself in 100 different ways. And so I always, I don't want that lane because that's the unhappy lane. How do I get myself in a lane that is creative and not this? And so I had to sort of always overcome that. And when I went to college, I went off to college. I wanted to be a sportscaster.
Nice.
I wanted to be Marv Albert. I got on the air the first week of school to just read the scores on the campus radio station. I had an absolute panic attack.
Really?
And the next day I quit my dream of being a sportscaster. I just stopped. I had an anxiety attack. Nobody was listening. The idea of being on a microphone to me was so terrifying. I quit my dream. And then I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do now? And you're like, oh, maybe my parents were right. Maybe I will be a lawyer. But I was an English major. By the time I got out of college, I'm like, I want to write, the great American novel. Well, obviously that did not go over with my parents at all. We just spent $100,000 on college and all this gift. So it was a battle from maybe 7 years old. The two sides of my brain, one they looked at as not a serious person, and the one that I looked at is that's too serious a person.
Dude, it's so funny because first of all, my dad also worked for IBM for 40 years, and he was in Southbury. He started in Armonk, and same thing. This is back in the heyday when he was, the dark suit, the white shirt, and my dad was very much a workaholic, and my mom, she was pretty much a stay-at-home mom, and then she embarked on a career in early childhood, and she was working at the elementary school that we came up in, but I never tested high. It was just always that expectation where doctor, lawyer. And, I think it's so funny that when, you reflect back on the expectations that parents had, it just kind of shapes the way you feel about yourself, and the pressure that you put on yourself, but really they put on you. And it's it's just that catapult effect.
Right. So, I don't know how long we have here, but fast forward, I didn't have the talent to write the great American novel, but I started writing screenplays and sold a couple, and the whole time, and then I started to produce television and direct and move into theater, and I started to make my way in a little bit of a show business career. Cool. My parents were never comfortable with that. My dad would say things like, what's going to happen when you run out of ideas? And I said, I don't think there's any limits on imagination. I don't think you should ever run out of ideas.
Yeah.
Constantly, though, like not supportive in any way, not encouraging. I went to Los Angeles. I worked on Hollywood, and by any reasonable standard, I am making a living in one of the hardest businesses in the world, statistically. Mm-hmm. Never okay with it. Always always, you're wasting this. You had all this education. You had this upbringing, whatever. So a lot of people tell their story of my family believed in me and they encouraged me. And I work with so many actors and actresses out in Hollywood for years, and their biggest fear was having to go home.
Really?
To give up the dream and go back to their hometown and have to get what they consider to be a regular life. Because they have always been told by a lot of people, like, the odds, and it's really hard to make it. And when you have to make that decision, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it in the entertainment business for a lot of different reasons, or it's time to have a family, or especially for the women, there is that pressure, and I had that pressure of there was no level of success in that business. I could have been Steven Spielberg. They thought that I was just like lying around on a mansion on a raft at the Playboy Mansion all the time. Yeah. I did that like monthly, but not all the time. But they thought I was not a serious person with a serious career, which is why I did not give them grandchildren. Mm. You know, they do a straight line to, because he was in the entertainment business, we do not have grandchildren from him because it's not serious.
Mm. That's crazy.
I know.
I mean, it's not crazy. I mean, it's also how they were like brought up and whatnot. But like one of the things that you said, which is kind of awesome, is like people in that space are motivated by not ever having to go back home. And granted, it's like the regular life, but it's also facing the people who
I failed.
Could say, I told you so.
I tried to be an actor. So I would always talk to people like, what do you consider like success in the entertainment business? You know, are you in the entertainment business if you're in a tribute band? Mm. If you're hosting karaoke night? Yes, you are. Mm. You are making people smile, laugh, think, share. Like there's a lot of ways to do it, but some people, you know, the standard is like, can you make a living in this? Is this a career? It's hard to do. It's a crappy business. You know, the fun side of Hollywood is the old line is it's high school with money.
Yeah.
The other side of it is you're dealing with
high school with money.
The cattiest, undercutting people. Hollywood is where no happens. No matter what your idea is or your dream is, you're going to hear no a lot. It's rough, and that jades you too.
Yeah.
So, you know, my purpose was never to get to what I think the point of the question is. For too long, I had a misguided purpose.
Okay.
And my purpose, I thought, was to prove my parents wrong. Mm. And I was focused so much on their lack of belief in me that I did not focus enough on either the belief in myself or the people around me who could possibly believe in me. It was this anger and resentment, and it was too much about them and not enough about, we'll table that and see what the possibilities are.
Yeah, so it was just like, I'll show them.
Yeah, it was a little bit, my motivation was they were wrong. And it wasn't more about, I am right, or this is an opportunity. Like there was a lot, it was almost like vengeful. It was very negative. It was very negative energy that I was putting out towards them. Instead of countering their energy with, you know, my mother would call me and she'd be like, I'm watching Regis and Kathy Lee and Cameron Diaz is on there. Why aren't you dating her? I'm like, I don't know her and I'm not dating her. And it's like there was their negativity. I would push back against that versus finding positivity either in myself or from people around me to feed off of. Yeah.
When was like that aha moment when you were like, oh, I love doing this and this is why I'm doing it? And when, if ever, were you just like, their perception of this business that I've decided to embark in is basically rooted in ignorance of what I'm actually doing?
You know, that's a good, so I was always, so I was a writer, director, producer for a long, long time. That is what I am at my core. But I was always trying to find ways to filter my own thoughts, ideas, perspectives through other people, through characters, through stories, through everything, because I was not confident in my own voice to say, this is my voice. This is what I think. Mm. This is my purpose. I would be like, oh no, I would feel confident in something, and then I would couch it in a screenplay and be like, oh, I wrote that, but I don't really think that or whatever. I was not confident enough to stand on my own ideas. It took me years, I don't know, 20 something years in the entertainment business before I became the talent. And some very smart people, my manager, my producer, Adam Carolla, who some people know around here, came to me and said, why aren't you on the microphone? And going back many, many years, I that flashback to college, I gave up that dream at 18 years old that I will never be the face. And these people are like, why are you going to such lengths to avoid being the person, being the talent? And so they, pushed me in a direction of like, is that even possible? I don't have to hide behind this. I can have some level of vulnerability. That led me down the road to, really finding like, well, if these strangers, so these are not family members who believe in me, why can't I believe in myself? My parents aren't doing it. My girlfriend at the time was not doing it. Like, where are these people? And people saw something because they just looked at me for who I was and more importantly, who I could be. And it changed a lot.
I mean, this goes back to needing one person to believe in you.
Yeah.
Which, was the conversation with your partner.
It's about, and to give her some credit too, like people have to take, whether you're going into business with somebody, whether you're getting into a relationship with somebody, whether you're getting into Uber with somebody, it is a leap of faith that requires trust and belief and giving each other purpose. I am not going to let you down if you believe in me. If you take my hand and I've got your hand, together our purpose is to get to a destination together without breaking that trust, without, going off course and just been like, I have you, you have me. Mm-hmm. Let's get to a place of understanding, sharing, growth, success. But that is a balance. And any kind of partnership, any kind of relationship, any kind of family dynamic really is about communicating what that means almost every single day in some way. Some degree of positivity, some degree of, we were right to take this journey. We were right to go on this career path. We were right to have the belief and the purpose in each other. That's really rare and really hard to find. Mm-hmm. A lot of people spend their whole lives, and my podcast segue is called Great Love Debate. So I'm somebody who's very interested in love, dating, and relationships. It is a lot easier to find somebody to love you than to find somebody who believes in you.
I love that.
You can be in love with 30 people in your life. And if you drank, probably 60. But finding that person to believe in your purpose or to be that person because they did have belief in you, that it's going to create purpose. That is the rarest thing in the world. That is the most underrated attribute in a partnership or relationship that people have trouble kind of identifying because it's not something we talk about, which is why I really like this podcast so much, not to give you credit in the middle of it. Purpose is such an interesting word that we don't talk about enough. So when I'm like, you gave me my purpose, that is the highest compliment I think you can give anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that. I want to ask one question kind of going back to what you had said earlier about the entertainment industry. And do you think, because I'm sitting here kind of thinking like, yes, it's a very different industry, but if you look at it, like, it's not unlike any industry. It's just that people go in wanting to be those A-listers right away.
Oh yeah, the showbiz is made up with 90% of the entertainment business is hardworking, blue-collar, trade people who are no different from anything else.
Yeah.
Take away the grammar, and that's a lot of money. It's when you're trying to be what they call above the title talent, the creative, the writer, director, producer, actor, actresses, or whatever. That is a lot about ego. And when ego comes into play, you're always, am I not good enough? Is somebody prettier than me? Am I talented? There's more imposter syndrome in Hollywood than just about anywhere. And one lesson I learned, my first agent out there, Hal Ray, he said to me, I was going to this big meeting at a big production company. And he goes, nobody knows anything. And I go, what do you mean by that? He goes, the longer you are out here, you will learn nobody knows anything. Basically, everybody's full of it. Everybody's faking it to try and get to a certain point where they're comfortable. Mm-hmm. I would have these meetings with people that before he said something like that, I would be totally intimidated that I have this imposter syndrome. They're like one chapter ahead in the book, you know? And once he said that to me, he goes, nobody knows anything. I was like, okay, I can play in this field for as long as I want, but it's exhausting. Like I guess I'm still in the entertainment business, but I've gotten out of Hollywood. A lot of people, your shelf life there is like 20 years. It's not real. It's not a real place. 95% of my life I have lived New York area, 3 years in Paris, and 17 years in Los Angeles. Those are not real places. So when I go to places like Cleveland and Minneapolis and I have real conversations and people, I get something from their purpose. Yeah. Their purpose is community, family, civic pride, this region. And I've been in sort of silly places, as I say.
That's awesome. So, okay. No, that was a great answer. And thanks for like really spelling it out to my audience. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I do want to just jump into what you do. And what you do is, with the Great Love Debate, is you talk about love, and now like we're commingling it with purpose. And I have so many questions on that because I feel like so many times people use the love of someone else and define that as their purpose.
Love is a very nebulous term. I love the Giants. I love pizza. We use it a lot. So I wrote a book called How to Find Love in 60 Seconds. I wrote it like 12 years ago. It was a little sort of a satirical look at dating. But what it really was that I believe that there were opportunities all around us everywhere that if you could recognize them, act on them, and not dismiss them, something could happen in a 60-second window of time. A spark could happen. But I wrote in the book, and I stand by this today, that before you can find something, purpose is one of them, love is one of them, you have to be able to define it. How do you define love in romantic purposes? And for me, that definition was that there's nothing I'm doing that I wouldn't rather be doing with her. And that doesn't mean I have to do everything with her. It means this would be better by somehow she is either sharing in this or whatever. And so a lot of people are like, okay, that works for you. What works for me? So I started this show based off my book. So I wrote this book called How to Find Love in 60 Seconds. My manager at the time said, rather than do a traditional book tour, why don't you raise some of the questions that the book raises in like a theater, town hall style setting? I was supposed to do one of those just to promote the book. We are now 11 seasons, 165 cities, 13 countries. I've traveled theaters, comedy clubs, venues all over the world doing the Great Love Debate. It eventually turned into a podcast. Raising these questions, I thought that if I could get a better understanding of men and women, particularly women, I would get the keys to the kingdom. I did not get the keys to the kingdom, but what I did do in raising all these questions of all of these people, I was really asking them of myself. I wasn't honest about that for a long, long time. I'm like, no, I girls like me, dating's fine, it's easy, no problem. There was something in there that I wanted to keep this conversation going with thousands and thousands of people around the world, hoping that something would click in my head. And I think what I was lacking was not the love, was not the relationships, it was lacking the purpose.
Yeah.
And the person to give me purpose, the person to let me be vulnerable and honest and share and all of these things. And that's hard to find romantically. That's hard to find in anything. But that act of raising questions and not necessarily knowing what the answers are, and I still don't know the answers to this day, but it made me go deeper. It made me get introspective. It made me think, how did I get to 40, 45, 50 and never been married?
Yep.
I'd be in these sort of fun relationships, but it wasn't like, and my girlfriends would always look at me like, what are we doing here? And I'm like, what are you talking about? We had a good time. We went to that theater last night. It was fun. And they're like, but what are we doing? And I never understood what they were saying because I would never go, I would always make the analogy that I would put enough chips on the table to stay in the game, but I would never go all in. So I would do that, but I needed to go all in. And without having purpose and without having partnership and without having all of the things I talked about earlier, I wouldn't do that. And then I realized after asking thousands and thousands of people these questions and then doing my podcast with millions of listeners and everything, they're experiencing something that I am not experiencing. And that goes back to the childhood. Because my home seemed unhappy, I did not trust my parents' love for each other, which means I didn't trust their love for me, which means I didn't trust the concept at all. And that was the disconnect. So, not to get too into therapy and stuff, you have to go back to 7-year-old Brian and that environment and heal with it and make peace with it and not do everything out of resentment or to show my parents up, to find my own purpose beyond that.
Well, I love that. I love first how you said you have to define it. And, I think that is complex when everyone defines it differently. It's almost like love's going to always be a moving target.
Yeah. I think so. But what love means to you at 20 is going to mean different to you at 75. And you have to be able to navigate that and grow. A lot of times, relationships, you get into it boyfriend, girlfriend, and then you go to husband, wife, and then you go to mom and dad. And mom and dad is a much different dynamic than especially boyfriend, girlfriend. A lot of the fun is that, a lot of the and you're just trying to survive. That is why couples, they have to learn we're going to get through this part of life and hopefully get on the other side of it. And that's a challenge. It's really hard to recognize what the issues are in real time when you're just trying to survive the storm and hang out on the raft or whatever wet weather analogy you want to say to do here. But because I deal with a lot of divorced people, and a lot of divorced people don't. I asked them when they knew the marriage was probably not going to last 50 years, and almost everybody has an answer to that. Almost everybody knows that moment.
Have that moment, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, this will not. And then some decide, like, well, I'm just going to stick it out 5, 10, 20 years. A lot of people are doing math in their head, like, okay, the youngest.
When you ask them that question, is it different moments for each person usually?
I'm frightened at the moments. A lot of people are like, when did you know you were not going to last 50 years? And a lot of the women are like, when he asked me to marry him, or when this happened, or I always knew, or whatever. Like, again, easy for me to say, never been married.
Yeah.
But I still believe in the concept. I still believe in the happily ever after. I have not been jaded by this. But a lot of people, I don't ask why you got divorced. Yeah. That a lot of people don't really even have a clear answer to that. They'll be like, I ask when you knew it wasn't going to be forever. And that is a much more interesting question to me. And I think in that moment, the relationship lost its purpose.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How much do you think shared purpose contributes to everlasting love? And the reason I ask that is because so often you see people go couple goals and, power couple, and these terms are thrown around. What do you think the role of shared purpose may play in everlasting love?
I think the relationship is a shared purpose, but I think you have to have your individual purpose. And you have to respect and honor and support that individual purpose. You need to have your own motivations. And those can be, sometimes if you are a mom and dad and you're coming out of that, a lot of people need a second act, a third chapter, everything in life. You have to constantly, and hopefully the partner you're with is supportive of this, and their purpose can encourage your purpose without necessarily being the same purpose. I think purpose, you don't have to have one purpose. You can have a lot of it, and just understanding what it is that people need to find that within themselves. And a lot of people just don't have it. If you ask, I don't know, and you do this, you ask people how they found purpose. If you walked up and down the street here and you said, what's your purpose? I don't know if everybody has that answer as easily as like, who's your love?
Yeah. It's
what's
so
your favorite
true
sushi? And it's so important.
Yeah, it's so true because a lot of people will link their purpose to their occupation. And, personally, I identify my purpose as my North Star. And my North Star that I've identified is I am here to help people have a better relationship with themselves however I can. Whether it's having vulnerable conversations like that, whether it's them simply spectating what I'm doing, which empowers them to make difficult choices in their life, or whether it's, I do work a 12-step program, whether it's guiding someone through the journey of sobriety. However I can help people is that's my purpose, is, whether it's through action, whether through direct intervention, or whether it's however I can do that.
Yeah.
And there's no end game to that, because I think when you put all right, there's a destination, and once I get to it, that's what I can constantly be doing that in whatever scheme of my life, whatever turns.
Totally agree. Now, and this is where I disagree with a lot of people who talk about love, dating, and relationships. Obviously, you have to do some degree of work to recognize the issues. But this idea that you need to be a complete person to come into a happy... Nobody's a complete person.
Yeah.
You should never be on a complete person. And the right person at the right time can create an environment where your purpose can flourish, where your vulnerability can open up, where your honesty and your truth and all that. If you just... And that's where, magic can happen. Yep. You just have to come together at the right time and be ready and open to something that you would have never thought was a possibility in a million years. And, when that happens, you realize how special it is, and you realize what was lacking before. And that becomes your purpose.
It's so funny that you say that, because, I absolutely agree. You can be, two people who need to work on yourselves individually and still find love. One of the things that I think is important, though, is safety. You need to feel safe, obviously physically, but emotionally, you need to feel safe around this person, where it's
Totally. I used to always, my friends used to always say, you date the disease of the month club. And I go, what do you mean? And they're like, you're always looking for these women that have some overtly obvious issue, either a drinking problem, eating disorder, basket case, whatever. And they're like, are you trying to, be some sort of hero to them and all that? I go, I think if we focus on what's wrong with them, nobody's going to point a spotlight on what's wrong with me. And I didn't realize that at the time, but looking back, that's what I did it. If we're like, oh, we're just got to work on you and support you and all this, nobody was ever going to turn around and be like, what's wrong with Brian?
Yeah.
Well, once I was comfortable doing that and been like, I'm going to lead with everything that is broken with me. Can you handle this? That's what changes it. That's what gives you that relationship.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's so accurate. It's where you, you don't want to look in the mirror.
No, and you don't want the spotlight put on you. But when you find somebody who's, we both have our shit, and let's figure out a way to ride through this together and to build each other up and believe in each other in a way that didn't, and recognize that we all have a past and some issues and some other. That is it. The being in a judgment-free relationship is magic.
I mean, do you believe the phrase hurt people hurt people?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. And I'm not saying that's, it's bad, but knowing the why you hurt somebody and admitting why you hurt somebody and admitting that maybe I reacted this way or thought this way because of something that happened to me 5, 10, 15 years ago. When you were 5, you were 10, you were in your boyfriend, you were in a relationship. Being able to own it, being able to say, I was wrong, I am sorry. I am very, very quick with I'm sorry now.
Mm.
You talk to people when I was 32. I would never want to admit I'm wrong. And I'm sorry to me was I was wrong.
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry matters. I think thank you matters. I think a lot of things matter to me more than I love you. And I grew up in a house that didn't say I love you. And so maybe I put too much importance on that most of my life. But I need real, honest, authentic feelings.
Yeah.
And sometimes I love you is said habitually.
Working in the love industry. And
I'm in show business still, it's entertainment, but yeah, I admit that.
Given what you're doing, given how much you have conversations with love, about love with strangers and with just I can only imagine how many conversations where people just spill their love story to you.
What do you do?
What has that done? Because the way I look at it, it's I worked in restaurants forever. When I worked at a steakhouse for years, I got sick of steak,
Yeah. I never get sick of the subject matter.
What does that do for your bandwidth when it comes to love in your life?
I think it makes me, so that's funny you asked that. So I used to produce this off-Broadway play here in New York, and it had a cast of 12 beautiful women. And my girlfriend at the time, it wasn't that she was jealous of the beautiful women. She was like, you are using your emotional bandwidth on this group of women, and there's nothing left for me. And she was 1,000% right. Like, just the emotion. So talking to this, I think I am very good at picking up on, maybe I do that, or I think I'm always learning. Mm-hmm. The love situation is something that all of us have perspective on, have experience with, have pain from, have everything. That's why I think it's a never-ending conversation. I can grab any two people off the street and we can talk about love, dating, relationships.
Yeah.
Other than tacos, I don't know if there's too many things that we can do that everybody can jump right in. Yeah. Not everybody can do this podcast because it's scary if they don't know what purpose means. Like, it's not. But if you're talking about love, I want to talk about this. And a lot of times when I first started the Great Love Debate, it was very Jerry Springer-ish. It was very blamey. It was very men against the women. I produced a play once called Boys Dumb, Girls Crazy. It was a little bit of that. But after a couple of years of doing it, I'm like, I want people to feel better. What I'm selling is hope. And that this shared experience and coming together and realizing we all go through these journeys in life, that there's sort of this camaraderie in the collective misery till you get to that place. That really has grown me. That has grown my show more than anything. And all over the world, people want to blame the city they live in. They want to blame their ex. When you say like, don't say I just haven't met the right person yet. You probably have. You probably just weren't ready to recognize them. You probably just weren't. It was the timing. There was probably something there. Once you sort of take ownership and say, I am in control of my own relationship fate, that is a lot better than just leaving it to chance.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I love how you touched upon how your the podcast and the way you presented the show has evolved. How has your personal perception of love evolved over the years?
I think that I am a big believer, again, never been married, easy to say, I guess. I think if you, and a lot of people say, once they get divorced, they get jaded, or I just want to have a good time, or whatever. I believe that if you break down the fear and you gave everybody, you say, here's a document, here's a notary, we're going to sign this. And on this document, it says that if I sign this document, there is a path to a happy, loving, sharing, trusting, honest relationship with one other person for the rest of my life. I will sign that document. Everybody would sign that document. They either don't trust the path or they don't believe such a thing exists. But if they could trust that it exists, I think everybody wants that. Yeah. I think they do. You ask people come to me all the time and they say, well, I'd rather be alone than be in a bad relationship. You should. You should be alone than be in a relationship. People don't look at good relationship as an equal possibility. They think the choices are alone, bad relationship, and good relationship is out here on Pluto somewhere. If they looked at it like that, it was equally possible if they took the steps and did the work and communicated in a way and got through the ick. You're always going to get through these walls in relationships where you have to be willing to work through them and not just pull the chute and quit. And I think if people do that, I think you'll be all right.
You got to be
like everything else.
Put the work in.
Yeah. People, sometimes the ick comes, before the edamame comes on the first date. You're not willing to work through it. People are like, bet I'm going to find something absolutely perfect. You're not looking for perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. You're looking for this sort of imperfect sharing of a life. And I think that's what I've learned.
To embrace the imperfection of it and just go on the journey.
Understand that there's imperfections in us. We're not the same people. We don't always see things the same way. We don't always, get along. But if we believe in our purpose as a couple and where we can get to, I don't know. I think that's everything.
Yeah, man. I mean, like when you you talked about that moment when you were just like, all right, like this is it, like, and I'm all in. How did that feel now? Like you're doing this thing, you've been doing it for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Just kind of a full circle moment. Have you ever gone back to your parents and been like, hey, like, check this out?
Yeah. I mean, there was a point where I would do that.
Yeah.
Or I'd send them a television show where I'd produce it. I'd be like, hey, this is going to be on MTV, and you'll see my name in the credits. George, he's still doing that stuff again. Like, no, it never, it all goes back to if I did not do something, what they consider to be substantive with my intellect, it was never good enough till, and it really, like, I just, you know, I had a really good therapist who's just like, you've got to let these people go out of your life. And I did. I just cut ties with them.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was a big step too, that you're never this ongoing battle. And people say that a lot to me. They're like, you know, you talk about your parents on the podcast a lot. They're still on your mind. It's not an obsession. It's not a proof. Like, I had to just let the feelings go, and it's a little more matter of fact now. So
yeah.
I
mean, that's
I found my purpose beyond that.
You found your purpose beyond that.
Yeah.
And now, sorry, I'm just like kind of like caught off guard with that. And like, because I think a lot of people say that about their parents. And you know, like, it's necessary in a lot of ways. But that's cool that you're able to detach the emotional attachment, but like, you can still talk about it in just like this is how it played out.
As I travel the world, you know, that's something that I had deep shame about. I would date people or be in relationships, and the fact that you are not close to your family is a real red flag for a lot of people. It's really important. And after a while, I was not ashamed of that, because I would meet so many people that had a lot of reasons why those relationships just break down and you become estranged, and you have to step aside from the toxicity of it. And that really gave me some strength, you know?
Do you think you're able to do what you do because of like your unique story, where like you have this like almost, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like this outside looking in perspective on love?
A little bit. I think I've always been, you know, you go back to the passion and the curiosity. I've always been so puzzled, you know, interested, whatever. I will never, you know, I've done 500 episodes of my podcast. People are like, do you get tired of talking about this? No, because there's so many ways to skin this apple, and you're never going to have all the answers, and you're never going to hear anything. So I just think, you know, like my perspective of it, coming from a place of, why are you so interested in the love stuff? I think it's a pretty straight line, because I didn't feel it in my home, and I saw other homes, and my mother would almost make fun of it. Well, they're not serious people, those people. They're laughing all the time. I'm like, well, why do they have to be serious people? We go to our neighbors' houses, and they're having such fun. Yeah, my parents, they really frowned on stuff like that, which is strange. I have no real relationship with my sisters, because they bought into that, and they never saw my perspective. There was always this, well, we had some degree of money. What are you complaining about? Well, I just wanted to have a catch with my dad.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. So, you know, again, I'm as hopeful as I've ever been.
That's awesome.
My purpose a little bit is helping other people find their hope, because I think there are answers out there.
I love that, because, you know, I think like love and purpose are similar in that everyone has their own story.
No doubt.
And, you know, like, you can't, like you said, like, I get excited each guest that I have on, because no stories are identical, you know, and you know, like, when you, like, I can't get enough of it, man.
If the love of your life becomes, in a lot of ways, the purpose of your life, or the purpose of your life becomes the love of your life, like, you've hit it.
Yeah.
You've hit it. So, yeah.
You know, so, you know, I like to wind down and just ask a couple of rapid fire questions. And, you know, I'll just lead with, see, with you, it's unique, you know, because we just unpacked so much. Like,
There's always a little more to unpack. Have at it.
But like, what advice would you give to anyone who is in that purgatory of finding their purpose or finding love?
Ask questions. A lot of people are looking for the answers. You got to look for the questions. And by raising questions and not being afraid to raise questions, not being afraid, like, this might be a dumb question. The more you ask questions of other people, the more you will see new perspectives and things that eventually, I think, something will get triggered in you that wouldn't have been otherwise. You can't have the answer without the question. And too many people are looking for the answers, and they don't know what the right questions are. if you keep asking them of yourself, of others, of scenarios, of situations, of relationships, I think the answers will come.
Awesome. And the second thing I want to ask you, the second rapid fire question is, what 3 things do you do on a daily basis to kind of keep you grounded?
The first thing I do to keep me grounded, I don't know if you find grounded.
Keep you grounded in your purpose.
Grounded in my purpose is I learned from a very, very smart person that you have to practice gratitude. And if you have gratitude at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, what went well today? What do I have that I didn't have before or that I have an opportunity to have? What do I have that is unique? What do I like? All of that is a fairly new concept to me. That everything should be rooted in gratitude. I've learned that there's magic in maybe, which means that there are possibilities out there to explore, to think about, to take, to go down roads you haven't, and that almost all of life's answers lie outside your comfort zone. And if you know that, a lot of the fear goes away. This is supposed to feel like this. This is supposed to not feel great. And if you go to that scary, vulnerable place, I think you'll be okay.
Dude, I love that. I love that. Listen, man, I'm so grateful for you coming onto the podcast.
Yeah.
If you can, please tell my audience how to reach you, a little bit more about the Great Love Debate. And
go to greatlovedebate.com. Is our 11th season of the live tour. You'll see tickets on sale for, I think the next show is in Boca Raton, Florida, at the Boca Black Box Center for the Arts. greatlovedebate@gmail.com if you got questions, comments, or whatever. And the Great Love Debate podcast, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast on all of your podcast platforms.
The one and only Brian Howie. Thank you so much.
This was fun. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.